Hello, I'm Stephan Schwartz, and I want to welcome you to Schwartz Report. And I want to pick up where I left off last week about libraries, because I think this is an incredibly important, although not very well covered, aspect of what's going on in the United States. As I pointed out last week, libraries have played such a big role in helping poor families improve their lives or immigrant families integrate into the United States. In just so many ways, libraries, we don't make a big issue about them, but they provide places where discussions about things can happen in the community, where people can get books without cost. Maybe they can't afford the books, but they can go and read them or borrow them from the library. And I want to start off by talking about this censorship that's going on in the United States. The Moms for Liberty and the other groups are trying to take out of the library or eliminate the library altogether. So let's start with what it is they're trying to censor, the subject matter of the books that they're looking at. And it's anything that has to do with where there might be violence. Well, you think, well, that's of course. And yet you grow up in a family where somebody is violent and you don't understand, you don't see how it works, why it works, what causes people to do that. A book you find in the library may explain that for you. Topics of health and well-being, they want to take out of the library. If you have developed some illness, somebody in your family develops an illness, and you want to know more about it, you go to the library and get a book. Themes of death and guilt or grief, and you want to know, how should I behave? How do I deal with this, the death of someone that I love? What do other people do? And you go to a library and you find a book about that. And of course, the LGBTQ, anything about non-heterosexual sexuality, what do? You go to the library. But what if there's nothing in the library? And you're 13 years old. How do you find out how that fits into society as a whole? How you can cope with it? All of those sorts of things. Those are the things that are being taken out of the libraries by rabid groups of right-wingers or legislatures. So what happens when people take books out of the library or eliminate libraries? What happens in a democracy when this kind of censorship occurs and reading books becomes a political issue? We have, as it happens, as I dug out, a lot of evidence about this. But I want to start with actually the basis of reading books, and that's literacy. Because as I did research on this, what I discovered was just astonishing. Here's what the National Literacy Institute reports about literacy in the United States. Now, you think if you read books, you read your newspaper, you read books, you read magazines, you read manuals, tell you how to do things. You think, oh, well, everybody must read. No, illiteracy has become such a serious problem in our country that 130 million adults can't read a child's book to your child. Amazing. 21% of adults in the US are just illiterate. That was in 2022. 54% of adults have literacy below 6th grade level. 45 million are functionally illiterate and read below 5th grade level. See spot run. I mean, you got 130 million adults who can't read a book to their child, and 45 million who can't read past the 5th grade level. which is just the beginning of reading, would just be incomprehensible. 44% of American adults don't read a book a year. So just, they don't read. The top 3 states for the highest child literacy, this is good news: Massachusetts, Maryland, and New Hampshire, in that order. Massachusetts is the most literate state for children in the United States. Maryland, New Hampshire are next. And the bottom 3 states are Louisiana, Mississippi, and New Mexico. And what do you see? The ones where the illiteracy is the greatest are the ones that are run by Republicans. New Mexico being a kind of swing state. When I began doing this research and I came across these statistics, the image that came to mind and stood out for me was this idea that 130 million parents could not read their child, that's 4 to 10 years old, The Big Cheese, or How to Catch Santa Claus, or Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Lost Christmas. Those are the 3 best-selling young children's books in 2023. Forget about my favorite childhood book, The Wind in the Willows. I don't know what yours is, but parents couldn't read Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Lost Christmas. They literally couldn't do it. Couldn't read the directions on some electronic product that they bought. Had trouble reading directions on a sign. So if you're a parent who can't read and you are part of this group that's trying to gut school libraries, let me describe for you what's happening to kids in America. And now again, the resource is the National Literacy Institute. Approximately 40% of students across the nation cannot read at a basic level. I saw account after account of college professors complaining in the academic literature that the students that were coming into their classes, the freshmen and sophomores, couldn't read the textbooks that they were assigned. Almost 70% of low-income 4th graders, and there's a definite correlation between poverty and illiteracy. Between about 70% of low-income 4th graders cannot read at a basic level. 49% of 4th graders eligible for free and reduced price meals finished below basic on a reading test. Teacher disposition changes drastically when they're trying to teach kids that can't read. The teachers become frustrated and irritated, and it just destroys the whole education process. Student disposition changes when they're made to feel inadequate because they can't read the textbook they've been assigned. So it harms the psychology of the students. Students struggle and tend to drop out of school. So we are becoming an increasingly illiterate country, or low literacy country. 60% of the behavioral problems occur during reading assignments. Struggling readers suffer socially. Other kids make fun of them. They feel they have low self-esteem. They struggle and feel emotionally damaged. Their families, they can't read either. The whole family begins to feel socially inadequate. So what do you think? Do you think those kinds of statistics are affecting the social well-being of America? Boy, I certainly do. If you can't read, it's very hard to understand the issues that you need to know in order to participate in a democracy. But I want to get even deeper in this, because as I dug into this research, I can't tell you how disappointing how depressing it was that for most of our history, reading, being able to read, going to libraries, using libraries was a central part of how the culture grew and became stronger and how democracy became clearer. And now it's going the other way. And what about children who come up and who, as they enter puberty, recognize they're part of what today we call the LGBTQ community? I'm not a young man, and I've never met a single gay man or a lesbian woman who I got to know well enough to talk about this sort of thing, who did not tell me that they knew their sexual orientation from the time they became sexually aware. And all of them told me they looked to library books to help them understand their feelings because they were embarrassed, or in some cases, if they had a particularly religious family, were afraid to talk about it with their parents. So as Moms for Liberty and other such groups seek to have all the LGBTQ books pulled from the public library or the school library, what are these children going to do when they try to find out more about their feelings or who else is like that and what can they do? How do they do that? They won't be able to do it. And are we talking about just a few children? Are these LGBTQ kids, or is this something that they elected to choose, that you could train them out of it or something? And there's just a small number of them? No. There are several million children in the United States. Look at this. The UCLA School of Law, Williams Institute, dug into these questions, and this is what they found. And I want you to look at the numbers by state. There are nearly 2 million young people, as I said, who orient themselves with the LGBT community. And it's hard, particularly if you're in a rural or southern area, an area controlled by Republicans, because they make fun of you and they ostracize you and make your life difficult. But there's more than that. We don't teach sex education in 38 states anymore. So kids aren't getting any kind of education about sex, how healthy sex occurs. And they can't go to the library, public or school, because the books have been taken out. And so what is that doing? Let me give you some facts that ought to further alarm you. According to the Sexuality and Information Council of the United States, as I said, only 38% of high schools and 14% of middle schools across the country teach critical sex education as defined by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So if you take out all the books on sex education out of the libraries, out of the school libraries, the public libraries, as these right-wingers want to do, and you stop teaching sex education in the school as they demand, and you're a younger teenager, and can you remember yourself and how you were when you first became involved in dating and had sexual attraction for someone, and you were embarrassed to talk about with adults in your life? So where did you go? You went to the library. What do you do today? Watch porn on internet? Yes, that's exactly what's happening. Huge increase in young people watching pornography on the internet. What kind of an effect do you think that has on the nature of the relationships that they would have? But it's worse than that even. When I was a boy old enough to join my parents at the dinner table, when there were family guests, most of the talk was about medicine because my father was an internationally known anesthesiologist My mother had been a surgical nurse. One of my uncles was a cardiologist. The other was the head of a major clinic. Another was a hospital administrator. Two great aunts were famous nurses. One had founded the Frontier Nursing Corps, and the other had begun the children's convalescent movement. And I have a memory from that time, a dinner memory from when I was probably, I don't know, about 11 maybe. And the enthusiasm of that evening's conversation around my family dinner table, the smiles, the happiness, when they talked about how penicillin, which had just been discovered and begun to be available, was finally breaking the crisis of syphilis. They thought it would become a minor issue, that this disease, which had haunted humanity for centuries, maybe thousands of years, would finally be taken care of. And by the 1950s, it was. Syphilis almost disappeared until today, when poor health care for present-day illness and the lack of proper sex education has allowed it to arise from the dead. And once again, it has become a crisis. And I want you to pay particular attention to where the problem is worse. Why? Because once again, what stands out, of the worst 10 states, what do you notice? Except for swing state New Mexico, which is a kind of purple state, all the red states controlled by Republicans and states where there is no sex education and books have been taken out of the library are under assault. And so here are the actual statistics. Mississippi, Louisiana, Alaska, South Carolina, South Dakota, Alabama, Georgia, Arkansas, New Mexico, North Carolina. Those are the states, the top 10 states where sexually transmitted diseases are flourishing because poor health care, poor knowledge, censorship has made it difficult for people to understand what happens until they come down with one of these diseases. Gonorrhea, syphilis, all those diseases that haunted humanity, they're gone. But now they've come back and they're haunting us again. As I dug through the research to prepare for this podcast, what I was left with was the conclusion that something has gone deeply awry in the American culture, something that is damaging the health of millions. And part of the reason is clearly that public and school libraries are being censored. That America, once the envy of the world for making knowledge available to everyone, has been deliberately and actively damaged and destroyed. And I want you to ask yourself, particularly if you are in the medical field or you are involved in some civic activity, what can I do to reverse these negative and harmful trends? Because if we don't reverse them, we are a country on the downturn. I don't want to see that happen. I suspect you don't want to see that happen. So ask yourself, what can I do that can reverse these trends? How do I protect the libraries, both in the schools and in the community? How do I stop censorship? What can I do? How can I get involved? Who do I vote for? Ask yourself, and ask the people that you do vote for, where do they stand on these issues? Because if we don't reverse this, it will get to a point where I'm not sure it can be reversed. And that's not the country I want to live in, and I suspect you want to live in. Let's get it done. Thank you.